Welcome, friends and viewers, to the latest installment of Johnny W. Bread TV. Glad you could be with us, and hopefully today's issue will once again get you to think. Got some observations today about actually post-Tea Party observations, since yesterday was Income Tax Day and a lot of states had rallies, Tea Party rallies, against the government and against government policies, particularly policies of the Congress and the Obama administration. And what I like to do is let you in on why I think political discourse in this country is practically futile. I don't want to be negative. I mean, maybe some things can be done, and maybe if people recognize these observations, maybe there is hope. But let me give you my take on things. Members of the Congress, and actually many people who vote in this country, are looking for the government to correct, rectify, fix things. And they believe this is done via public policy or crafting legislation to make things better. Unfortunately and inevitably, with divergent opinions that so many people have, crafting legislation is going to be, at the very least, problematic because people are going to have such different worldviews about how the government can do things, or even what the government should do, what they believe constitutionally the government is entitled to do, and a host of others. So when people want to sit down at the table and discuss a variety of issues, one side is going to be always suspicious of the other side and how they will use what they say to potentially make them an ally to create, let's say, a public policy piece of legislation that will affect the masses. And it almost can be comical because people are so fearful of potentially being thought of saying something that would appeal to the other side that they talk in very traditional talking points. They almost talk robotically, and they don't want to concede points. I've seen this happen on both sides. When candidate Obama was running for president, he made a favorable comment about Ronald Reagan. And it was a very innocuous statement. It wasn't anything like he said he got into policy decisions that Reagan made but he just made some favorable comments about Reagan. And those who were chief supporters, those who were more less independent-minded but more liberal-minded, who liked Obama, thought he was one of them, so to speak, were up in arms. The media was up in arms. Well, what is Obama doing? What is he? Is he really who we think he is? It was silly. But the thought is, because people on the left side of the spectrum disagree so adamantly with people on the conservative side, and Reagan would have been one of those guys, that they don't want to hear anything potentially good about him, because they know then if anything would get done regarding crafting a piece of legislation and Obama potentially likes Reagan, the legislation's just going to come off not what they want. And this would also hold true on the other side of things. If, let's say, you were crafting, let's say, for instance, race is a big issue in this country. People are polarized on the issue of race and how the government should get involved in issues such as affirmative action. If somebody who's conservative mentions that he finds some police practices problematic regarding how they may systematically pull over black men driving cars in what has been known as driving while black, if somebody mentions that, particularly if somebody on the conservative side of things, who generally side with police on matters and want the police to have great discretion to pull over potential criminals, they just won't do it because they figure, well, if I come out and I say, well, some policies the police do are wrong, then people like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson are going to push for their congressman to do something, or this is the perception anyway, the people, the conservatives, they're going to push the Congress to craft some type of legislation to really be tough on police. And if somebody who is not among their camp, the typical liberal, but if somebody who's like a conservative or somebody who's not one of their usual guys who's on their side says something against the police, they're going to say, well, so-and-so, even reasonable conservative Senator so-and-so said that the police pull over black drivers systematically just because they're black. We can't have that. Now, if you say that, they're going to say, well, here's a point for the liberals, and here's why we need some type of a liberal legislation to correct matters. Whereas, actually, if somebody did come out and say that position, they really believe that, there's a problem with police practices. They didn't necessarily say, well, I want to craft legislation that you think is good. I'm just making a point that I agree that this is a problem. The point I'm making here is that because rather than legislation being the avenue of last resort to rectify society's problems, it's more like the first thing everyone thinks of. What is Congress going to do about steroids or about, movies that are too graphic for kids or records that have bad lyrics or whatever? It's always Congress that's supposed to fix things, not coming up with solutions by the marketplace of ideas or by other means. It's always the Congress. Because this happened, people can't really have honest dialogue. This is unfortunate. So what do? Well, just go one solution. Tell me what you think. In a court of law, when somebody's on trial for a crime, you need 12 people to convict. You need unanimous conviction, because if somebody's going to go to jail, be incarcerated, lose their liberty, that's a very serious matter. We all value liberty, and if somebody is going to be deprived of liberty and be deemed a felon, we want there to be overwhelming evidence, so much so that unanimously everyone's going to convict. That may be a little extreme in the arena of legislation. But I think the point is valid that when legislation is crafted, in some way, liberty is going to be deprived. That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes liberty needs to be deprived. We can let people drink in their house, but if people go out in their car and drink, then there are drunk driving laws in place. The overwhelming majority of Americans, probably everybody in fact, virtually everyone, would say drunk driving laws are good, and we have them. They were voted in overwhelmingly. So why don't, if we can't always make decisions in the free marketplace, we can't always have neighborhood watch groups or whatever, making decisions that's best for the common good, and sometimes we do have to go via the Congress. Why don't we have an overwhelming majority, let's say 75%, 3/4 of Congress have to agree on something? That way we would have legislation that really reflects what people want, the overwhelming majority of what people want. And that way, if liberty is going to be deprived for what we think is just better overall, most people would agree with it. And that's my take on this. Appreciate any thoughts. Have a good weekend, and thank you for listening. So long.